Okay, thank you very much for the invitation and especially for the very kind introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I'm Sahana Murthy. I'm a faculty member in the interdisciplinary program in educational technology. So, in IIT Bombay, an interdisciplinary program is a tiny department. So, it's an academic unit, the smallest of the kinds. And but otherwise, it's like any other academic department. And with me today is also Pankaj Chavan. He is a PhD research scholar and TA in our department. He is also the moderator or the facilitator for this session. So, like I'll discuss later, whenever we do online talks, even for your regular classes, it's always good to have a second person as a moderator, come facilitator. That will make your life very easy and it will make it rather seamless for the students or the participants, the audience who has joined. So Pankaj has a master's in mechanical engineering and he's joined our department for PhD 3 years ago. Okay, Pankaj, shall we go to the next slide? Okay, so a little bit about the history of, history and genesis of this talk especially. So what happened, what has been happening in our department for the past 10 years is we've been engaging in a project, among other projects. One of them is called Teacher Use of Educational Technology, where one of the sub-projects there was, now that we have these online media and especially MOOCs, massive open online courses, how do we make it effective for learning and learner engagement? Because a lot of the discourse in the online space has been about either technology tools or about certification and ease of use and all. But there is some research on how can we make it more effective for learning and learner engagement. And our group started working on it and we came up with some theories and models and frameworks. So one of it was called the learner-centric MOOC or the LCM model, which we developed as part of one of our other PhD students' thesis work. And we've been working on that for at least for the past 5 years. Now, what happened 3 months ago or 4 months ago, once the lockdown and all hit, was our director requested our department to, do something to help the entire institute to, transition to online instruction. And what we did, Pankaj, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, we is this team. One faculty colleague, Professor Sridhar Iyer, who's the convener of our group, along with PhD TAs Ashutosh Raina, Lucian Negeze, and Pankaj Chavan. We created a self-paced course on Google Sites, which I'll do a walkthrough later. And this was the slide you were seeing earlier. We just called it online instruction. And all the materials that we had created, videos, exercises, small questions, discussion forums, we put it there and released it in Creative Commons. And then a lot of other derivatives of that comprehensive course have started happening. For example, this talk is a small derivative. It's like a 1-hour overview of what that entire course is about. Now, along with the core team that I mentioned, there are lots of other people who I have to acknowledge, the co-creators of the learner-centric MOOC model, 3 postdocs on that project, lot of faculty colleagues, postdocs, and PhD students who have worked on the tools themselves. So the names you see here, most of them are IIT Bombay faculty, and of course TAs and other EdTech PhD students from our department. Pankaj, next please. Okay, so one slide history of our department. We started 10 years ago. We are celebrating our decade and we had a lot of events happening as part of the yearly celebrations. Once the lockdown hit, we just moved all the events online. We have 5 core faculty now. Some of them, like me, we have our core training in a discipline, science or engineering discipline. And then we've done formal postdocs in learning sciences or education technology or discipline-based education research. And a couple of people, in fact, have their PhDs itself in these interdisciplinary fields. We also have 2 postdocs now and about 25 PhD research scholars on the rolls. 16 of an additional 16 have graduated in the last 5-6 years. Last year we started an MTech program, so the first batch is now in their 2nd year right now. Next, please. So what exactly is educational technology and what do we do? The core part of our work is to design and develop pedagogies and technology for individual learning as well as collaborative learning. So we do develop a lot of theories and models and instructional strategies supported by the technology tools. And this manifests itself in the form of learning environment. So we call these technology enhanced learning environment, where, for example, a student can open his or her laptop or tablet and they log in. And then there's instructional material, self-help questions, automated feedback, pedagogical agents, an analytics engine running in the background, which actually is noting what the student does and maybe can give adaptive feedback in between, or it can help our research. Of course, we do explore the new fancy tools that we hear in the news, like virtual reality, augmented reality, and all, and try to see how we can exploit those better. We're doing some research with eye tracking with one of our faculty members, and sort of the ones on the sides are what we're dabbling in right now. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's come to the central part of today's talk. Now, all of us are familiar, more than familiar. We may have even decades of experience with face-to-face classes. And a typical, I'm not saying all, but a typical face-to-face class is the image you see on the top left. There's a large lecture hall. It can be 50 students if we are lucky these days, sometimes 300 or 400. There's usually an instructor with some PowerPoint or some other presentation. And this happens for, I've put down a 60% breakup. It could be 60, it could be 70, it could be something like that. And the rest of the time, the students spend individually maybe doing the homework, working on assignments. This diagram isn't the best because sometimes they work in groups in their hostels. So essentially what I wanted to say is that a majority of the instruction happens in the classroom, where it's teacher led or teacher facilitated, and then a fraction of it is happens when the students work on their own. So in our institute, we have we call it a 3006 model. So a 6-credit course has 3 hours of in-class instruction, and students are expected to put in equal amount of time outside of the class. Now, when we move to online teaching and learning, this model has to change a bit. And next, please. So we have to actually flip at least the percentage of time we are spending. What we need to do is to have students work with the course materials, which we have uploaded earlier beforehand, for the majority of the time. And we could have live synchronous interactions like the one we are doing just now, where there is a single teacher who's addressing a group of people together for the other 30%. Okay, so I'll come to why and how of all of this. But in a nutshell, this is sort of how we structure our online instruction. Next, please. Okay, so let's move to an activity. In the sense, whenever you see an orange or pink slide on your screen, it means that I'm going to stop talking and ask you to do something. Okay. So what the context here is that, let's say your colleague comes to you and says that for online instruction, it's sufficient to give lectures on a video conferencing software such as Zoom or Google Meet, like we are doing, record the lecture and upload it somewhere. This is a very standard perception that many of us have. Students could either attend the live session, or those who are unable to do it can view the recording. So if this is all that means, or this is all it takes to do online instruction, let's analyze for a couple of minutes what are the problems. So whatever problems you see in this approach, just type it in the chat window. What's missing? What concerns may you have, or might your students have, if this is all we're doing? If the question is not clear, ask me. Okay, we've started getting responses. Duration of attention, definitely that's one concern. Anything else? Clearing student doubts in real time, absolutely. Live interaction, yeah, the spontaneous live interaction will be reduced. Interaction, again, let's hear a few more, because these are definitely clearly concerns, but there are Some other serious ones. Eye contact, definitely. One way to think about it is when we have face-to-face teaching and learning experiences. I'm not using the word instruction or transaction because it's really a multi-body, many-to-many experience where a lot of modes are involved. What happens there and what do you see missing here? That's another way to think about it. Yeah, exactly. How do we make, I'm reading out one more response by Dr. Dipankar. How do we make sure that students are actually following? Okay, so there are several such problems. Pankaj, can we go to the next slide? So let's see. Now, I talked about face-to-face instruction. So let's see what happens if we just try to mimic it. Let's see a couple of other messages coming in chat. I'll just read them out. Student reaction could be, we won't know what student reaction is. In fact, we may not know what the students are really thinking, even in a face-to-face classroom, let alone when there's a computer, in front of 50 or 100 students. Students' interest in reading or listening, we can't gauge so clearly. Definitely, these are problems. Yeah. So, suppose we do this. We go to a live virtual classroom like Zoom or Zoom or Google Meet. We do a live lecture with students who are unable to attend. And I'm sorry for background noise. I live in a campus as green and with as much wildlife as yours. So sometimes you might hear dogs barking, cows mooing. I don't have control, and this is what's going to happen when you do online classes also. Anyway, so let's say we do that, and then we use the meeting software to record the lecture and make the recording available to students who are not able to attend. Okay, let's actually analyze this a little bit more. Pankaj, next please. Okay, so with virtual classrooms, let's actually look at it from the student's perspective for some time. And what Professor Amita Lok mentioned in the beginning is what I've put in the first point. Access issues are a big deal for many of our students. We did a survey in IIT Bombay, and I think you did something similar. We found that there is a percentage of students who either don't have a smartphone or don't have, let's say, long-term access to a smartphone, which means it's a shared device between the student, his or her siblings, and maybe a parent. And they're multiplexing the use of the device. There could be lack of flexibility in their schedule. Maybe they just have to do something at a particular time. Maybe there's power issues, network and bandwidth issues, again, are pretty important challenges that have come up. Okay, so this is one set of problems. The other set of problems is if we do hour-long lectures on these platforms over a screen, what about learner engagement? And of course, what about learning? So these are two major issues. Let's go ahead. Suppose now we do a little better and we upload these live sessions. This may not be sufficient. This is definitely a step better, and we're going to come back to this point over and over again about uploading recorded lectures. But this is not sufficient because there may be glitches in the recording. And even if you have excellent studios, maybe the studios just can't cater to 700 faculty members and courses this semester. So a lot of us are doing home recordings. There may be voice breaks or frozen frames, and these glitches, they may seem small, but they're really annoying to the viewer, and the students might lose attention. Okay, so the production quality is never the best. The recommendation here is do short lectures. And how short is short? I'm going to pull out a number from my head right now and say 10 minutes. Okay, I might hear some of you, feeling that daunted, that how can I explain all my beautiful derivations in 10 minutes? We'll come to all that. 10 minutes, no more than 15. Let's kind of stick to that. There's a lot of data, and not just from the pandemic, but over the last 10 years, once edX and Coursera and all have become popular, that even short lectures are not watched fully by most. And there's a huge variability in student motivation and student attention. Network bandwidth issues we've talked about. So one takeaway from all this is that lecture alone is not enough. We need activities to engage the students, for deeper engagement. Okay. These kind of activities can be done using, you can provide these activities on Moodle, for example, and we will see how to do that. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's say we do this. Give a virtual lecture, upload its recording, and provide assignments. Okay, this is what we've been doing for the last 2 months, 3 months, especially to close the spring semester, because we all went into a lockdown, at least here on March 16th, and the semester had just finished its midterm. You know, we had finished 7 weeks of the semester by then, 7 or 8 weeks. So for the rest of the semester, we tried to scramble. We did this. The objective was to provide temporary access to instructional materials and some instruction, and it was set up to provide quick and easy access. Okay, so what we are saying is that this mode, let's use it sparingly and in emergencies like the lockdown. Okay, and we still have to address the problems which are there if this is all we do. Next slide, please. So the necessary aspects like interaction with good teacher, with students, responding to student actions, meaningful discussion, especially with peers, student-student interaction, adapting instruction in real time, communicating with students. All these are also required along with the 3 or 4 aspects that we talked about in the previous slide. Next, please. The last two concerns last one concern actually I want to mention, and then we can take a break, is if you look at this slide, you know, you will see that there is a lot of focus on technology and tools, right? There is Zoom, there's a virtual meeting, there is a meeting software to record, there's Moodle. So what about the pedagogical strategies, the effective learning methods, and so on? So one more thing we need in effective online instruction, next slide please, is along with technology and tools, we want to focus on the strategies and practices of online teaching, right? So what I'll do in the rest of the talk today is to go back and forth, or rather first I'll talk about the strategies and some principles, and then we will go to the technology tools. Next slide please, Pankaj. Okay, so our goal right now is to exploit the power of the online medium and use it to promote effective student learning. So I'll just spend a minute explaining what this is. By the way, is my audio okay now? Because there's a mosquito fogger that's right outside my window.
So no, it's quite clear. We don't get that feeling.
That's fine. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. So the idea here is that while we might miss out a lot of things in online teaching, from the face-to-face instruction, the online medium itself has a lot of affordances which the face-to-face medium cannot provide. For example, the asynchronous mode of communication, the anytime, anywhere, any device access, you know, that is something which is really a powerful tool in the online medium, which the face-to-face instruction doesn't have. So our goal is to see what is good about the online medium, exploit that, see what can be taken over from the face-to-face instruction, and then combine it for effective student learning. Right? Next slide, please, Pankaj. Okay, just go back to the previous one. Okay, so if there are any questions or comments, this is a good time to take a bit of a pause. So either unmute and speak, or you can type in chat. I'll let Amitalok moderate if you have any questions in between.
Yeah, please go ahead. If you have any question, you can just unmute yourself.
Yeah, we only have 28 people, so we've done this talk for about 300 people in our institute. So this is a nice audience. Okay, so if you don't have questions, we have a question for you. Maybe the questions will come up after that. So what we'd like you to do is to just think about these various aspects of online instruction that are mentioned on the slide, and think about which, one or more do you think is challenging personally for you? And the way we want you to answer is not on chat right now, but just go to this website, menti.com, and put up this code that is given here. Uh, so this, what one more thing we want to do with this interaction is to just expose various simple technologies that are possible to have real-time live interaction. Okay, so just go to menti.com and you will see a text box there where it asks you to put in a code. Just put in your code there, and then it will be self-explanatory. Self-explanatory. Pankaj, we can move to that screen perhaps. Okay, so we have a few people joining already. What Pankaj is showing is your responses in real time. And I think what you will see, your interface will look a little different. It will ask you to click which of these challenges are you really concerned about. We'll just wait for a minute. If you have trouble with the website, I'm posting it again in chat. Menti.com, and the code is 264189. Okay, so it looks like right now about 5 people have responded, and you might see this. Sometimes 5 might respond, sometimes 20 might respond. Once again, this is something which, when you are doing your sessions, you have to keep explaining, all these different tools and the purpose of doing it and so on. So what we see here is that a lot of people are worried about interacting with students synchronously. Making videos seems to be another major concern. Time to prepare is also there. Using online platform like Moodle, there are 0 responses out of 6. I'm happy to hear that, but just check, especially in a large institute like yours or ours. We saw that a lot of instructors are not very familiar with learning management systems like Moodle, and some LMS, either Google Classroom, some other platform, or an LMS like Moodle is absolutely essential in these times. So if you find that your colleagues are not familiar with it, you need to help them get more familiar. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so online instruction involves content creation or curation. I'll come to curation in a minute. Uploading and sharing content, which is not the same as creation. Designing activities, providing resources, interaction with students, and assessment, which hopefully looks a little faded out. And the reason it's faded out is not because it's unimportant. It's very, very important, but it's because it's one of the concerns or challenges that don't have great answers yet, especially if you look at end sem type of assessments. And even in our institute, we are still working on various potential solutions, but we can take that up in Q&A. But the first 4, we have worked on it a little bit, and we have some tools as well as strategies that we can discuss in the next half an hour. Next, please. Okay, so before going to tools, let's look at the foundations. And there are 6 principles. I'm going to just do a walkthrough of each of these principles. All of these principles are also available on the Google Sites course. Okay, and I'll show you that after it. So let's go to the next slide. So the very first principle here is curate before you create. Now, what this means and why we are recommending this, we as well as everybody else who's doing online instruction is recommending this, is there are two, 3 reasons here. First, content creation is very time consuming and it's effort intensive. Second, there's already a lot of good content available. So we don't want to reinvent. Instead, we want to repurpose. How do we do this? We can use our own previous recordings. For example, many of you may have participated in NPTEL courses and have already created video content for your own NPTEL courses. You can reuse those. You can reuse your colleagues' NPTEL videos and recordings. You can find other open educational resources. The logos you see on the left are the ones, many of them are MHRD projects, some are international projects. There's a lot of high quality, vetted educational content in the open source domain which has been put up. So our job is instruction. So curation is exactly like a museum curator or a art exhibit curator. It's not just that we point links. We have to go and identify what works for our course, maybe what works for our style of teaching or the way we explain a subject. And once we find those materials, we want to explain to students, state how these curated content fits in our course plan and create activities around them. So I might have a video of maybe from my colleague's NPTEL course, and I might just look at a certain segment of it, minute 10.25 to 13.06. And I might tell students that, look, here this particular law is being explained along with an example. Watch it and do this activity or do this problem after it. So that's what's meant by curation. And put some effort in curation. Ask your TAs also to do that, because this actually will make things coherent as well as easier to deal with. Now, one question that always comes up is how much can we curate and how much do we have to create our own? Here, different institutes have different policies, okay, regarding curation. And check your institute policy. If you don't have a policy, ask your dean of academic programs or your director, deputy director, whoever. Just try to sort out this issue as a community, because it will really set clear expectations and clear guidelines for everybody. I think what we are going with in IIT Bombay is, I don't remember the exact percentage. I think they're still working with it. But when I used to teach my courses in the EdTech department till last year, about 30% of my class was curated content. Most of it was my own videos. Some were from other sources. Okay, so this is the curate before we create. I'm going to take up one question related to this. How do we get permission for reuse? Okay, this is actually an excellent question. Firstly, check the licenses. If it is in OER, Open Education Commons, or if it has Creative Commons license, like this talk is released under Creative Commons, you will see a logo. If it already has one of these licenses, just feel free to use it. Creative Commons has various types. Some of it is just for using. Many of it is also gives the user permission to change it, revise it. So these slides, I've put it up under just CC BY, which means all you need to do is give attribution, but then you're free to use it the way you want to. Some of it prevent commercial use, some don't. So just check the license. That's one way to do it. A lot of YouTube, second point, a lot of YouTube educational videos are available under what's called fair use and educational policy, or something similar to that. So what it means is that if you're using it for educational purposes, you're free to use it. Okay, so YouTube also has a license, you can check that. If even that's not available, what you can do is just write, if you can find this an email address of the organization or the person whose video you want to use them, just email them and tell them what you want to use it for. Ask them if you can, if they can give you permission. So you'll have to sort of check the licenses, and yeah, these are 3 or 4 ways you can go ahead with it. If you have more questions, Dr. Dipankar, if you want more clarification, you can ask. Otherwise, we can go to the next slide. Okay, the second principle is actually about the videos, the short videos that I discussed earlier. So the main principle is keep your videos short, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15, kind of. It's okay if you have a 3-minute video also. The second part B of it is don't lecture continuously for throughout your video, even if it's only 10 minutes, insert what's called a reflection spot. Okay? So a reflection spot is essentially an in-video activity. And since long lecture videos have been shown to be ineffective, we need to what's called chunk it. Chunk means identifying logical units in your 1 hour class or in your uh, chapter or in your weekly topics. Identify these small chunks. Each chunk, try to make it 10 minutes long. And within a chunk, see if you can put a short question or a short pause for a student where they do some small activity. How to do it using the technology, I'll come to a little later. But these spots are called reflection spots. And this kind of a video, it also goes by the name of a learning dialogue, because at this point, you can see it in the graphic on the left side. There's a bit of content. The video can automatically make to pause using a tool, or you can just do it while recording. You can tell the student, pause this video, write your answer to this question, and then continue. These student responses are not graded, they're not checked. Okay, so this is mostly for learner engagement in the content. You're not checking them, you're not grading them. But these have been found to improve engagement. And by engagement, I don't mean just attention, but engagement with the content, which has in turn, which the idea is that it in turn leads to better learning. Next slide, please. Okay, next principle comes to it comes to the point where we have these video chunks, and we are saying that between any two video chunks, give activities. So it comes from the foundation that give opportunity for practice immediately after students have viewed some content, and this is for assimilation, and do it frequently. Which means that what we don't want to do is have a lot of content video, a lot of it, and activities at the end, like back of the chapter. That's better to be avoided. In fact, I would say more strictly than that. Let's not do that. Instead, our model is video, activity, video, activity, video, activity. These activities are called learning by doing. They can be of multiple choice type, short answer, long text box, whatever your platform provides. So Moodle provides a lot of these different possibilities. Include those and give customized feedback along with it. Next, please. Pankaj will talk a lot more later about how to actually do LBD activities. And the reason I requested him to do it is usually it's the TAs who create these activities on Moodle. So we had a course for TAs on how to do it. I will come to how to do customized feedback. Actually, Pankaj will talk about it after some time. Okay, the next principle is actually about the additional materials. So we always give additional resources, references and all. Here, what we are saying in the online space is provide diverse resources in the form of web links, documents, text documents, activities, videos, and others to cater to different students. So what do we mean by different students? One is, you can think of it that some may prefer visual and some may prefer verbal. I mean, that's one way of thinking about it. But a deeper way of thinking about it is, let's say there is a video content on some topic, for example, Kirchhoff's laws. Okay, there may be some students who have really understood that really well and want to do something more advanced. And maybe there are some students who are thinking, well, how does this relate to Ohm's law? And maybe some students who are really stuck on the mathematics of it and they need to sort of take one step back to keep up with the content. So we have students who are following things at different levels. Now you may have three different trajectories for each of these three different groups of students. And these are what we call as learning extension trajectories. Again, put these up on your learning management system with a slight note saying, if you're struggling with the math, go watch this additional video and come back. If you want to know about advanced details, go to that web link, and so on. There is a long question on the chat. I'm going to just pause. I'm going to take this up in a few minutes. Okay, so just hold on, Deborshi. Yeah, just hold on, please. Yeah. Next, please. Leverage peer learning, we've talked about it. Most students learn from their peers, not so much from the faculty. And in the online space, the other problem is isolation. Students really feel isolated. So we need to make sure, we need to give activities where they are talking to each other. A quick way of doing it is using the discussion forum on Moodle, where you give a question, what's called a focus question, a very specific question. For example, especially in engineering, you may have analysis problems or design problems where there are multiple ways to solve the problem. So you can ask each student to pose their solution approach. Let's say it's designing some wireless network. Ask everybody, how would you solve this problem, and ask them to post it on the discussion forum, not as an upload, short text. Then the focus question will guide them. It will tell them that go and read two other people's responses and think about what was similar, what was different. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to ask students to form small WhatsApp groups. Students are great at forming their own groups, WhatsApp, Facebook, whatever. Let's exploit the social media, which they're anyway doing. You can have a mentor for each of these groups, or you can just ask students to informally split up into groups and come back and post their group's response. Okay, so operationally or practically, what this principle translates to is explicitly give a few activities that leverages peer interaction. Next one. Okay, the last principle is about responding to student actions. So I'll just tell you what this means operationally. What happens in a face-to-face class is we see our students at least 3 times a week. There is that interaction. In the online medium, you may have uploaded some materials and students may not have seen it. They may not even know something is uploaded. So as soon as you upload something, drop a quick post saying videos for this next topic have been uploaded, or 2 assignments have been uploaded, deadline is so and so. A day before the deadline, send a quick reminder. Maybe after the deadline, if you get a chance to quickly go over their responses, you can drop another quick post saying a lot of people have 70% of the class has responded. We are waiting for responses for another 30 people. I'm going to extend the deadline by a day. Or many people have responded and it's great, or this is what you have said. So you want to continue to have a dialogue with your students. You can do it, or you can assign a TA to do it. What we do is let's say your course has 2 TAs. Each TA is assigned, they have to spend about half an hour or to 1 hour every day simply posting these things, responding to discussion forum posts, as well as posting one common message every day, whatever is relevant. And this has actually been found to help students. This is not so much about learning, but helping them be in touch with the course, knowing that, look, there is somebody who's noticing, who cares enough that we are participating. Okay, so this is the last principle. Okay, let's look at a couple of questions before we go ahead. Yeah, Pankaj, you can be on this slide on online instruction. Next one. So practically, we want to make course materials available online for asynchronous access, where students can access it at their own pace or using their own device. Immediate practice activities we are done. A few synchronous meetings for live interaction, and a forum for content discussion. Okay, so let me take the questions bottom up. So in my what Amita Alok is asking is, in my own limited experience, I notice a quick drop in student participation in discussion forums. How do we incentivize it? So Pankaj, can we actually go directly to the LXI slide much further? I think it's like 40 something, and then we'll come back. Okay, couple of before, no, later, go ahead. One more? We don't have Alexa. Oh, I think we don't. Fine. I'm sorry, I didn't include the slides here. I'll put it in my final version. Let's go back to the 27. So I'll just explain what this is. So what we do in discussion forums is we give a focus question. Firstly, it's important to have a focus question which exactly tells people what to do. In the sense, if we say discuss or introduce yourself, that's really not focused enough. On the other hand, if we say post one way to solve this problem without equations, just your solution approach, post it. Or right in the beginning of the class, instead of asking people to merely introduce themselves, you can ask them, what is one big concern you bring this semester when courses have started online? Post. Okay, so we make a very specific focus question, and then we give specific guidelines on how they have to interact with peers. Okay, that's part one of it. Part two of it, Pankaj, go back 2 slides, no, where we had the LXI diagram. Yeah. After the discussion happens or during the discussion, the TAs or the instruction keep prompting, keep egging them. In the sense, if there is a really nice post, as an instructor, you can post saying, so-and-so has posted an excellent idea. Everybody come and see it. Or student A and student B seem to be debating about a very interesting proposition. What do the rest of you think? Vote whether you side with student A or student B. So engaging in the discussion forums is part two. Part three is what we call as a reflection quiz at the end. This is graded, but it has a very small credit, something like 1 point. This quiz can be as trivial as how many posts did you go and attend? I mean, how many posts did you read? And what was the most common way of solving the problem? We are only checking if the students have attempted it. It can be a multiple choice question based on the topic of discussion. Try not to make this complex. The idea is if somebody has, it should be framed so that if they have read the discussion, they should be able to very easily answer it. But if they haven't gone through the discussion, it may not be so trivial for them to answer it. So we don't want to give them questions related to definition. You don't want to say which of these is KCL and which is KVL, because that they can do even without going through discussion forums. But something pertaining to the actual discussion, and you may have to frame it after some of the discussion has taken place. So we do give credit for this, but what we call a whiff of credit. Okay? This whole this activity we call as a learner experience interaction. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. I'll quickly go through the technology tools because these are more about information. The conceptual part is sort of, we are taking up, we are sort of pausing on the conceptual part now. But we also need to know how to use the tools to do it. So when we go to content creation, we need to plan our videos, we need to record our videos, and we need to edit our videos. Assume you as a faculty member will be doing this on your own. Even if you have studio support, it's great. Maybe you have studio support for one or more of these. But if you're doing this for your own, in planning of a video, you need to prepare your content, the presentation. You need to identify chunks like what we just discussed and decide video format. So I'll just briefly mention the video formats. Next, please. Next. Okay. So you may want to have what's called a slide cast, which means you just want students to view the slides with your face, with your voice. That's what's called a slide cast. You may want your face to be visible. That's called a talking head. Next. You may want to write, especially if we have a lot of equations and all, you may want, that's called a screencast. You may want to do both. So you may want your face to be visible and the slide to be visible alongside it. Next. Or you want your face along with the picture, or you may want all of this. Next slide. Next. Just go to the next one, Pankaj. Yeah. So the one with the table. So for each of these formats of videos, you can decide this based on the type of content you have. And exactly how to decide, there are more details on the Google Sites OTeach course. For example, I'll just give you one example. If you want to engage, if you want to make connect with your learners, you want to really engage them, you want your entire face to appear on the screen for that 1 minute. So that is looking at learners. For that, you need a camera and laptop, and this is called a talking head. On the other hand, if you want to show slides which either have some diagrams or some text, or maybe you want to run an animation, or you want to show a program being compiled, all these are called slide casts or screencasts. Okay, both of them are very similar. This is when you want them to pay you want the students to pay attention to what is happening on the screen. It doesn't have to be slides alone. You might want to show them an actual animation, or there's a program, you type it, you want to show how the program compiles. So for such purposes, you want to use a slidecast or screencast. So what this summary shows you is what resources you need to prepare various types and various formats of videos. Next. There are several tools that are available. Now, one question that we always get here is, why are you showing us so many tools for each type of format? Why don't you tell us what you really recommend? And I have two answers for this. One is, we have made some recommendations. I'll show you where it is on the Google Slides, on the Google Sites course. But it's really up to you. For example, I'll just run you through one example. The very first one, slidecast or screencast. I learned only 2 months ago that my Windows 10 laptop has a free software called Xbox Game Bar, which can record what's happening on the screen. Okay, if you don't know it, go and explore it. Just on your search bar, just type Xbox Game Bar. It was meant, the purpose of it is to record games. It's built into Windows 10. It works pretty well for recording what is happening on the screen, even if you have slides on an animation. If that's all you want to do, you don't have to install anything, you don't have to do anything. It also records voice. Okay, so you can stick with Xbox Game Bar if that's all you want. On the other hand, if you want the full-blown version, the last one, you want a talking head, you want a screencast, picture-in-picture, and you want to move back and forth between them, there is a software called OBS. It's open source. I'm not sure if any of you is familiar with it. It's a bit of a learning curve, not too much, but a little bit initially. It works very well. Again, works well in the sense it does all these sophisticated things without having to go to a studio. We have an OBS tutorial itself on Google Sites course, so you can watch that. Okay. So next, please. Okay, so once you're done recording using any of these tools, you need to edit. Again, there are various tools. I often use this thing called OpenShot. It's fairly simple to learn. You may need to trim or slice. For example, when you're recording, I might make a mistake in the words, or maybe there is a pause, or maybe the doorbell rings. Okay, I don't want that in my final slides. I don't need to re-record the entire thing. I can just use one of these editors, trim it, patch it, maybe merge two videos, add pauses, include transitions, and export it. So you do need one editor. You can use OpenShot or any of the other tools that we've mentioned. Next. Next, please. Yeah, actually, go one slide back, Pankaj. One more purpose of using an editor is if you want to insert an in-video activity or a quiz, there is a tool called H5P. It's an online tool. And after you have recorded your video, you can actually insert a quiz. So the picture you see on the left side is from one of my NPTEL courses. And after doing the entire recording, I can create these activities, I can insert it. And what I want you to see is the red arrow that you see, right above it, you see a small white dot, okay, where Pankaj is also showing. That white dot shows up in the YouTube final video as the places where these reflection spots exist. So this is another slightly more sophisticated way of using, of editing your video. Editing helps because it makes the video very I mean, this sort of editing makes the video very interactive. Let's go to the next one. Okay, for uploading and sharing, you need to identify your video hosting platform and your sharing platform. Next, please. So let's go to the next one. Okay, so the only one more thing you might need to do after editing is if your video is very large, file size, there are some tools like Handbrake to compress them. So take a look, okay? We don't want to go more than, 100 MB an hour, something of that order, because you don't want high definition or high resolution videos. We want them, the file size to be small because of access issues, especially. Okay, you can share it on Moodle or LMS. You can share it on Google Slides. Bodhi Tree is an in-house IIT Bombay developed platform. If you're interested, you can take look at it. You can embed videos on YouTube or Vimeo, and the advantage here is that it just gives the main video. You can write wrappers, so you have to decide what platform, where space is available. Maybe your institute makes a policy on where all the videos should be. So this is more of a policy issue where you will share content. Maybe all courses in the institute decide to go on the same platform. Okay. There's a quick question: is there any open source video tool in which we can embed the embed the in-video quiz? Yes, H5P is open source. Okay, all the tools that we are showing right now are open source, at least the ones we have talked about so far. Next, please. Okay, creating activities. So go to the next slide, Pankaj, and Pankaj will speak a little bit about the LBD activities and especially two ways of giving customized feedback. One for multiple choice questions and one for open answers. So over to you, Pankaj.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, so like ma'am talked about like what is learning by doing and what should learning by doing activities should entail. So here are some of the recommendations related to design of such activities. So the first recommendation is don't push all LBD activities to the end of the module. So it should not be like you have given some 7 to 8 video lectures to the students to watch, and then at the end of those videos some activities are there. So instead what you should do is so intersperse them between the videos. So maybe after every video which is interactive, then you should have some activities in between the videos. And the most important aspect of LBD activities is giving feedback. So what do I mean by giving feedback is, so let's say you have designed some MCQ type of question, and there you have different options within that. Student may select one answer, so it should not be just saying that it's correct or incorrect. There should be a customized feedback to each option that they are selecting. So I'll talk about what is the importance of that and how to do it specifically in Moodle. Then feedback is also possible through for open-ended activities, like for example essay or long answer questions, or maybe you have some problems, let's say design related problems, and how to use rubrics and how students can get the feedback based on the rubric itself. So I'll talk about that in brief. Okay, so the first example that I'm showing here is one type of activity in Moodle that we have, which is called as quiz. So basically, if you go to Moodle and click on add an activity or resource, then you will see a list of activities here. So let's say if you select quiz part of it, so what will happen is the number of different question types will appear. So this particular quiz activity has multiple question types, and then you can go through it, and if you click on this particular option, then you can read the details of it here also. So I'll not talk about all of them, but I'll just briefly mention about some of the question types that you can use. So for example, multiple choice is very familiar to most of us, and I'll talk about how to effectively use it as an LPD activity in the next slide. But there is something called as calculated question. So basically some courses may involve practice questions, specifically numerical practice questions. In that case, maybe you want different numerical values in the problem, and then you can do that with the help of this particular question type, where randomly the values from a set of values will get selected, and every student will get different values in their question, so that this copying to some extent can be avoided. So now I'll specifically talk about one question type, which is multiple choice. So let's say you have selected this activity, and you want to create one multiple choice question, and you have created that. So here you can see one question. So this is the question, and these are the different options for it. So what I'll showing here is, so let's say student has answered this question. Now what is happening, so student has selected only option A. So once he has answered that, what feedback he is getting is, it's not only correct or incorrect. So the feedback he is getting is the answer is incorrect, but this is the reason for that. Okay, and then at the bottom also, like which answers are correct, he or she will get. So along with that, what will happen if the options that he or she select, so based on that the feedback will be given. That's why we are calling it as a customized feedback. So the recommendation here is, in specifically in MCQ type of questions or multiple selection type of questions, instead of just saying that it's correct or incorrect, providing customized feedback will help students to understand like what is the correct answer and why is it a correct answer, and if they have given some incorrect answer, why is it so. So this kind of customized feedback can be provided specifically by using this type of activity, which is called as quiz in Moodle.
Pankaj, quick interruption here. Uh, so this is customized. It's not truly adaptive, because you will see that in a way these feedback, it's canned. But we don't simply say yes or no for all answers, and we don't get the same feedback for all choices. So from the student's perspective, depending on what they choose, they see something different. Uh, those of you who feel that, oh look, this seems not really adaptive and not really customized, you are right on the one hand, but in the online medium, it simulates customized feedback, because based on what I choose, I actually see an answer that's meaningful for me. I just wanted to mention this point. Go ahead, Pankaj, to the next one.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the second type of LBD activity that you can design on Moodle is something called as workshop activity. So what it involves is, so if you want students to do peer assessment or even the self-assessment, if you want them to do, and even instructor can evaluate students' work, then in that case, you can select this particular type of activity, which is called as workshop activity. And then you can design rubric within this activity itself. So what exactly rubric does is, so let's say you have some design kind of problem where multiple acceptable responses are possible, and instead of just looking at the product, you want to look at the process also, like during the design, different stages of design, what all decisions the student might have taken, and how the design process was followed. So in that case, rubric is a good assessment tool that you can use. So basically rubric is used for grading student responses specifically to open-ended questions or open-ended activities. So it's a grading criteria that you can use for different activities that you may design for your course. So what you can see here is this entire matrix. So this is called as rubric, where the first column is are nothing but different set of criteria. So let's say this is the rubric for, let's say, presentations that students are making, then content and development, how they have organized and structured it. So these are different set of criteria on the basis of which you want to evaluate students. And on the right side, these four columns, what you can see is these are the description of different performance levels. So whether the performance was unsatisfactory or outstanding. And then students can also go through this and understand, like, okay, so whatever the thing that I'm working on, so my work falls into which particular category, and then they can improvise, because the description for each particular criteria is also given. Like if they are in needs improvement category, then maybe they can see and like what is satisfactory, they can go through it and they can improvise their work. So this is something like they can get feedback from this rubric itself, and they can self-evaluate their work, as well as instructors can use this kind of rubric to evaluate students' work, specifically which is open-ended in nature.
Okay, thanks. Pankaj, can you go to slide 57 directly?
Yeah, please go
Amitabh,
ahead.
can I take 5 more minutes? I know it's just past 12, but
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's
okay,
completely
thanks.
fine. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so just a last couple of closing comments. What about these kind of live interactions? Because we have been emphasizing recording, chunking, recording activities and uploading small ones for asynchronous use. So the recommendation here is that definitely live interactions serve their purpose, but let's not use it only to deliver content. Let's not lecture for 1 hour using these platforms. Definitely not 3 times a week. So a good way to use live interactions Usually a rule of thumb that we use is, let's say we have 3 hours worth of instruction, so to say, okay, 3 hours equivalent of instruction per week. For 2 hours equivalent, we upload instructional materials beforehand. And 2 hours equivalent doesn't mean 2 hours worth of video. It might be maybe 4 or 5 small videos with a bunch of activities and one discussion forum activity. And we upload these beforehand. And maybe 1 out of these 3 hours, we do a live interaction where the focus is on clearing doubts, on Q&A, or if you want to ask students some question. So it's more of an actual interactive session. In the session, have a moderator, like I mentioned earlier. Use all the tools that the video conferencing software provides, like chat, hand raise, poll, encouraging students to speak up or participate. Use external software like Mentimeter that allows you to do multiple choice polls. It allows you to do open-ended word cloud type of questions. Just go and explore Mentimeter. Okay? It's a lot of fun. And I've used it both inside a class as well as on the online medium. It's great fun to use it. Students also take to it very quickly because it's real-time response. And yeah, can you just go back to the previous one? End the session by asking students to post what was their muddiest points, what they didn't really understand or what was unclear on chat. And pick these up, address it in your next week's interaction or in the next week's instruction materials. So these are some small but effective strategies to use the live interaction medium. Okay, Pankaj, let's just go ahead. I'll tell you where to stop. Next. Okay, here I just have one comment. I'm not going to walk you through all these tools. There are several tools. It could be daunting to select it. How do you select? Let's go to the next slide. It depends on your purpose, ease of use for you as well as for the students. It depends on security, privacy, and such issues. It depends on the availability of tech support. So when you are comparing technology tools, there are a number of such parameters that you want to think about. Here we have listed the parameters. And on the Google Sites course, which I will show you, actually, Pankaj, do you have it open, the sites? Can you just quickly show that? Okay, so this is not a walkthrough, it's really a flash through. On the left side, you see the entire course structure, okay, including preparing content, delivering content, interacting with students, and each one has subtopics in it. Let's just go to creating LED videos as an example. Please do a slow scroll. There are some conceptual parts. Videos are embedded into this. Keep going down. It says when to when you should watch the video. It talks about how to decide the format of your LED or learning dialogue, whether you should do screencast, picture-in-picture, demonstration, and so on. This person you see in the video, he is Dr. Samir Sasraburde. He's one of our, he's an expert in UI UX design, and he has a PhD in EdTech. Let's go down. Okay, there's a self-check question on this site. Okay, you can go ahead and attempt it. Keep scrolling. Now we come to tools. So here you see description of various tools, download links, tutorials for getting started. Keep going down. And some recommendations. There's a table at the end which talks about recommendations. So I just wanted to show you this. Most of the pages are of this nature. So if you want any more information, you can go back to the sites. I'll also share the slides. Okay, let's go to slide, I think 60. Next one. Yeah, just put this slide up. So final takeaway, there's no single correct way of conducting online courses. Okay. However, there exist principles. It's a good idea to adhere to the principles until you're so confident that you're able to bend the principles a little bit. That's also possible. I mean, these are not natural laws like, I don't know, law of gravitation or something, but they're principles. It's not necessary for all faculty members to have the same approach, nor is it necessary for you to follow the same approach throughout. Okay, so you start with what you're comfortable with, go up the levels gradually. But as you're doing this, be aware of the trade-offs and make considered decisions. Okay, no, don't just take default decisions that everybody is doing 3 hour Zoom lectures, so I'll also do it. That's what is not recommended. So I think this is a good time to pause then, end, and I'm happy to take open questions. Limitations. Sorry, I need to tell you what we did not discuss. Labs, that's a big challenge. There are some small strategies, but we didn't discuss this at all. How to conduct remote exams and proctoring, we haven't discussed. Analytics, how to use it meaningfully, there are better answers, but I'm not an expert in analytics. I have a colleague in my department who does this, but these are some topics which we haven't discussed. Okay, so I'm happy to take a few questions at this point.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great talk. Actually, I was going to ask you about a couple of these points you mentioned at the end, specifically about analytics and assessment. But I'll wait for the others before I maybe badger you with more questions. So yeah, if any of you have, first of all, a virtual thank you from here. So virtual claps for you. But yeah, if any of you have questions, please feel free to unmute your microphone and go for it. Otherwise, I certainly have a couple of them lined up. Okay, so I will wait for some of them to maybe go ahead with their question. Here is one question I had. So, at what level of granularity do we take feedback? So, what I noticed in the few months that I did engage students in the online platform, I realized that in the beginning the feedback was pretty useful, but I think there was a point beyond which it just found. So, is there maybe some principle about how to design feedback? Like, I don't want to burden the students with too many surveys or things like that, but is there some kind of a principle you follow about trying to get feedback so you can kind of improve the next class?
So this is feedback on the materials that were posted and their understanding and those kind of
Yes,
stuff. Okay.
they are understanding really. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, it was possibly not very well formed because I myself was really exploring it, but I want to get feedback about how I'm doing. So the next class could be a
Mhm.
slight improvement over the previous one.
Mhm. See, one thing you can do. I mean, this is one strategy in the live interactions. So even let's say if you're doing it once a week or once every 2 weeks, start off with a multiple choice question, which
Okay.
is designed. So, for example, let's say the previous weeks you discussed topics A, B, and C, or A and B. You can have your choices that I understood both topics very well. Topic A was clear, but not topic B, the reverse, or I need more practice on topic A and topic B. So, have a bunch of carefully designed choices and make them vote. Okay. And what you need here is actually the distribution. At this point, you're not very keen on who said what exactly. You want to get a sense that you want a pulse on your students, on the class as a whole. That if you find that a lot of people said that topic B seemed okay, but I think some more practice would be useful, you know that you can give more practice. So see if you can design some uh, more precise questions, but where you get statistical level answers. That is one way to do it.
Okay.
Because once, if you do individual surveys, that's also fine. It might, I mean, if you have very quick Google form or Moodle, just click on something type of survey where it's very easy for the student, it'll the chances of you getting more responses are high,
Okay.
and the chances of you analyzing them is also high. But if you give very elaborate questions, I mean, how are you going to sit and analyze those responses? That's also there. So see if you can use some of these tools to get quick responses by designing the questions. I'll give you one more example we did. I had a question here, but we didn't show you. Pankaj, can you just put back the slide on the word cloud question? So Mentimeter has a option where you can ask an open-ended question and have people type in things or either choose something, and it creates a word cloud. So here is an activity we had actually designed for today. We ran out of time, so I didn't ask you. So it asks you to list the top 2 features of any of the online platforms that you think are effective and engaging. So this is actually a question. The hidden agenda for this question, if I had asked it, is I would have known what platforms you're familiar with and what features you're familiar with. So if I were truly adapting the rest of my talk, what I would do is I might see that, oh, not too many people are familiar with chat or hand raise. So let me speak more about it. So this comes up as a word cloud in my interface. So you can use some of these tools. So they're just small strategies and tools to get aggregate feedback, but something that gives you the pulse of the whole class.
Yeah, that's very helpful. I mean, I wasn't aware of Mentimeter. I thought it was a nice way to get feedback real time. So that's
Yeah. Since we are on Mentimeter, Pankaj, let's go to that slide on the peer instruction question, no, the mechanical engineering question. So there is a technique called peer instruction, which is about writing multiple choice questions, but they're highly conceptual and sophisticated and difficult. This technique has been pioneered in the physics education research group about 20 years ago by Harvard professor. Now it's being used in computer science, engineering, physics, everywhere, okay, psychology and all. So this is just an example. So Pankaj used this in his fluid mechanics class. See, these are questions where the student has to conceptually think. They're usually not numerical and they're not very easy. So just take a look at this question where there are two bricks being held under water at different depths, and you're asking them on which brick is the force required to hold it higher, or how does A compare to B. Now, in order to solve this question, actually a free body diagram is required. Ideas of buoyant forces, mass, everything is required. So this is actually not a very trivial question, but you can use it in a poll fashion to get real time responses. And let's say you find that most people say that you know force on brick A is bigger than B. You know that there is some strong misconception among students. And then you might go back and talk again about buoyant forces, or give them an additional link to a video on buoyant forces saying that once you're completely submerged, the force is the same, and so on and so forth. So if you want to learn more about this technique, just Google peer instruction and you will find ready-made questions in many, many engineering and science topics. And you can create your own also, of course. Okay, anything else?
uh, I maybe one other question. I'm sorry to bother you again.
Actually, Amita, look, I'm going to
Yeah,
take one question from
sure.
the chat in between,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah,
I had
absolutely. There was
skipped
one
it
there.
earlier.
Yes.
This is by Professor Basu.
Yeah.
So this is actually a long question. Let me try to summarize it. The idea is that, look, we've been familiar with face-to-face instruction and learning and teaching for 20 to 30 years, or you can say for 2,000, 2,500 years, if you look at the history of humankind. Now, all of a sudden, we are going into online education. Is it effective? What do we do about it? What about things like creative thinking and so on? Okay. So this is a little bit of a philosophical question, but I have two responses here. One is very, very pragmatic in nature. That look, we are at this position in the history where we have to go online at least for one semester. All of us around the world are having to adapt to it. So let us adapt to it to the best of our knowledge. Let us okay, rather than just doing an emergency remote teaching type of adaptation where we say, oh look, let's just do whatever. Let's try to make the best of it. That's a pragmatic approach to the question. But a slightly deeper approach is online instruction and online teaching and learning have been studied at least for 20 or 30 years. Actually, a little bit more if you look at distance education, the history of distance education, and those big packets which used to come in the post, what IGNU used to do several years ago, and so on. But at least using the electronic media, using television, radio, and of course now the World Wide Web and internet, it has a history. There are universities and institutes which specialize in it. There are countries where that is the primary mode of instruction, even for the government institutions. And the two that immediately come to mind are Canada and Australia. And the reason they do it is because of their size. They're very, very large countries. They don't have too many, and they're very sparse. So they don't have too many strong face-to-face physical universities in the country. So they've moved to online instruction. The biggest government not a private institution, but a government institution in Canada is called Athabasca. It's fully online, which means, so you might say, look, we are not Canada. And that's correct. But Athabasca has figured out how to do these things well over the 20 years that they have been online. And this is a not-for-profit standard state university. So, and they have put out strategies, research papers and all. So that's just one example. But when there is precedence for this before, and when there are several strategies, research-based strategies, I think it behooves us to go and look at that and see what we can borrow on that. The third point is what I had already mentioned. The online medium does give us really good affordances, like this real-time chat, real-time voting. I use it in my face-to-face classes all the time. It's much better than a hand raise like this, because there is an anonymity, a pseudo-anonymity for students. Or I can also track students if I want to. Some of these software allows me to understand who said what. So if there's a really weak student, I can approach later and say, okay, it looks like you need extra help. What's going on? So let's exploit the power of technology by including this strong pedagogical strategies. So that's where we are really coming from. Okay. Yeah. So this is sort of a long answer to a long question.
That was pretty useful, actually. I mean, the sense, the way you summarized it, and it's really about that. It's kind of embrace what we have, and you never know, some of the learnings may stick around once things go back to the norm.
Actually, that's a really important point. Some of these techniques you might find yourself using even in the face-to-face class later.
Okay, one slightly, I don't know how to phrase this, but let me go ahead with what I have in my mind. One issue is, so you emphasize the part of creating along with curating. And one issue, not issue, but one question I have is, as a new instructor I've just gotten into academic teaching now. One question I have about curating is, once you do involve material that is already available online, is that a fear that the course that you plan to kind of, is there a possibility that the student kind of gets driven towards that material and your own course can get a bit diluted? I mean, when I try to involve, say, 30% curated material from other sources, possibly other instructors who might actually be better than me at what they do. But is there a possibility that the course by itself, because I don't have a lot of control on what the student does, is there a possibility that it can get diluted, or that's just a worry I need not have at this point?
Yeah, so I'm going to actually talk about assumptions in what you said, okay?
Yeah.
So when we say course and course materials, usually the first thing that comes to our mind is recorded videos, because that's what has what we call as content or information. So if we say that, look, course materials and teaching involves transmission of information, what you're saying might happen, that students might go and look for information elsewhere. In fact, the World Wide Web does a much, much better job of transmitting information than you or I can. We all know that, right? But now we are saying that teaching and learning, or even my course, is not just limited to transfer of information. Let's look at everything else, okay? Let's assume that I point links to videos. All my videos are outsourced. I don't like this word, but that's the word we all use, that we point links somewhere else. But that's not it, right? What about the practice? So what about the contextualization? And I want to give you one example of NPTEL courses, the way they're being used. So we had, so there is an instructor in second year college in a medium-sized city in Gujarat. What he does is, he's a teacher in an engineering college, second year engineering college. He doesn't lecture. He uses only NPTEL materials. But after every 10 minutes, he pauses He translates the material into Gujarati, whatever is not understood. That's one thing he does for contextualization. Second thing is, let's say the NPTEL instructor talks about some principle or some technology. He gives examples which are meaningful to the students, local students. That's the second degree of contextualization he's doing. Third degree is he asks questions and sets assignments that are again relevant to the local students, but based on the NPTEL material. So he's doing a lot of contextualization. And now you might ask, is it his course or is it the NPTEL instructor's course? It's like that ship of Theseus philosophical conundrum. And I think if you put ourselves in the roles of, that's why I use the word curators. So we are not simply pointing links, we are doing all this contextualization for our own course. Then you can go ahead. I mean, it sounds abstract, but I like this Gujarati instructor's narrative because he actually came and told us these are the three things he did.
I think the example is pretty much bang on. So thank you.
He never lectures, he doesn't lecture at all. He 100%, but he plays those videos in his class. It's not online. It's a face-to-face class. He plays them for 10 minutes, pauses, does some small activity.
It's fantastic for us, particularly at Kharagpur, because your talk has come at the right time. We have 1 month to kind of prepare for this, and now we have the right guidance. And I think we have ourselves to blame if we don't build this material. 1 month is good time to think about the material and curate it, like you put it, in the right manner.
You will need some institutional level mobilization, because otherwise it's very daunting. We are such big institutes that.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. And one final question from my side. I don't see a lot of people using the opportunity, but I would certainly like to. This is one difficulty because I personally am going to be offering an undergraduate and a postgraduate course. Now, I actually can appreciate all these tools that you've mentioned, and I'm going to most likely use them in my undergraduate course. But with a course which is graduate level, it has a lot more research component. Are there specific principles that you would filter out from what you've spoken about? Because it's sometimes a little hard to create this kind of interactive material for graduate level courses, and it's a little easy to do this for the undergraduate. So, any particular things that you would maybe emphasize, perhaps which would go into a graduate level course?
I might actually emphasize peer learning a bit, in the sense.
You mean by using breakout groups and so on?
Yeah. Okay. Either breakout groups in the live session, or if there's a project-based component in your course. A lot of MTech level and PhD level courses have a project component.
Yes.
So you can still do group projects provided they are not hands-on. In the sense, if you have to actually make them build a circuit or something hands-on, it's one thing. But suppose you have them use a simulator and design something or do some analysis. And also we have an instructor in the physics department. So for his analog electronics course, it was a third year UG course, but he gave them problems and he asked, he sort of changed some small parameters for every group of two or three students. And he asked them to run it on the simulator, do the analysis and submit the final images, for example, of what the simulator spit out. So they work together, 2 or 3 people did together. So any project-based component, programming, anything where you don't actually need to build, you can emphasize even in the online mode. And how they split up the work, either you can help them or you can just leave it up to them and tell them that, look, each of you must give a short statement saying what you did for the project. So for PG courses, this the code of conduct and all is a little easier to handle.
Yeah, I agree.
So emphasize that a little bit more and see what is not required. For example, if you don't need to respond to them every day, then drop that, especially if it's a small course. Or you can have a separate WhatsApp group and somebody is posting on it rather than posting a Moodle message every day. But these videos with in-video quizzes plus learning by doing activities, as for assimilation, you can have complex ones also. It doesn't have to be only straightforward ones. Keep that going.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, Pankaj has posted something which I think we did in our PhD level course, that on Moodle an activity called Wiki can be used to facilitate and manage group projects. So it's like any other wiki, but we've used that for students to plan and document their projects.
Okay. Let me look it up.
Yeah.
In fact, one reason I'll ask most of the participants, the one reason you should go with the course is apart from, of course, learning new things about how to go about conducting online teaching. The best part is, the perspective that is given for these kind of things. Many of the tools, I mean, I've been using Moodle for a while, but I was just not aware of these things. So you get a quick run through about the facilities possible in all these things. So please have a look at the course Professor Sahana Murthy mentioned in the beginning, the online course. It's going to be extremely helpful.
And if there is anybody from, say, humanities or social sciences, the requirements are different. For example, they might need students to do a lot of writing and giving feedback. So
Yes.
again, there are tools. There's a tool called Journal in Moodle, which can be used. So again, depending on your domain, today we focus more on engineering and science because that's what I'm familiar with. But even in the social sciences, where the requirements are a little different, there the discussion forums are what need to be utilized a lot more, perhaps.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. ठीक है.
Yes, thank you. So it's a very
Sure.
extensive Q&A. Thank you very much. I've taken you a lot over time, so thanks for
No,
sticking
no,
around.
that's my pleasure. Yeah.
So once again, thanks from everybody in the audience here, but certainly thanks from me for first of all graciously accepting the invitation and then giving us a fantastic talk. So yeah, it took me 5 years back, so it was just the same. So thank you very much again.
Thanks again, huh? And really, it was a pleasure for both of us, Pankaj and me, to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Pankaj, also.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Okay.
moderating. Hope to meet you soon again. Yeah. Have a good day.
Sounds good. Yeah. Thanks. Same to you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.